Hey, what's going on, Archons? Welcome to another Boulevard Blake YouTube video. Today I'm actually finally able to talk about the KeyForge Winds of Exchange pre-release, which this last Friday I was able to partake in. I hosted one at my LGS. I got them to order some packs in at Magic Stronghold, which most of you are aware of this store who provided the crazy deals and sales, and they ordered 12 kits, only received 8. Shipping was delayed, so we had to delay the whole event. So we finally got underway on Friday night, and we've now got a set KeyForge night that we're doing once a month locally here in Vancouver, which is really nice. So here is the KeyForge pre-release pack. In it you get 3 packs. You also get a premium chain tracker, all the stuff that they had kicking around. I already had this one, but I have a spare one of these now, so maybe this will be used for some other means. But I actually like this one. I think it's really nice. I was hoping we had the diametric charge ones because I don't have that one. And then on top of it, inside the pack was obviously 3 Winds of Exchange deck, and then this card here introducing Requidam. And it just gives you a little debrief on what Equidon is. And then it tells you about token creatures here and the rules regarding token creatures, which is amazing because hopefully there were some new players attending these pre-release events, and they got some information to understand the game a little bit more. Now let's go into the deck I built. So I took down my tournament going 3-0 with a spicy build. I had a very interesting composition of houses in the fact that I had every single deck had Sanctum, and every single deck had Equidon, and then 2 out of the 3 had Saurian. So my pool was actually a little bit tricky. I found that having the overlap made things harder rather than easier. So the first thing that happened when I started to build was I saw this. A cleric token. It instantly had me in, and I was like, okay, maybe I can build something around this cleric token. And I had actually 2 decks in the end available because of 2 concepts I wanted to do. One was this Sanctum house I really liked. Lots of pips, draw, some decent Ember control. Token generation had the proc, which was really huge. And then it had this interesting Equidon here where I could create lots of tokens. And you see just some great stuff here for token generation. Had the Shizuku swapper, Nifflepaw, but it was actually I like this too. Obviously the Ikuiji outpost, but this was the card. Make a token creature and then choose a friendly token creature and an enemy creature if you do swap control. So with the cleric being in play, I just thought this was a great opportunity to get to potentially throw some Ember captured over to my opponent. I was trying to see ways to make that work. So yeah, that was huge consideration for me. And then I had also a dino board here that provided, you know, just some ways to exalt something potentially or create a threat that had to be dealt with. Or Tribune Pompatus was amazing. That was actually in both my dino sets, was a Tribune Pompatus, which was huge. So just some really neat things in this deck. I ultimately did not go with this deck, even though I liked the idea and concept. I thought it would be fun. What swayed me was I felt the deck might have been a little janky. Like I was looking for that specific token, and I was worried about the other elements not being as well-rounded as what I actually did play. This is the deck I went with. It was a warrior deck. And when I went through my evaluation, after I looked at the Brobnar, I knew Brobnar is what I was going with no matter what. Like that was a locked-in house, was Brobnar. And let's show you why. So obviously I have the warrior token here, okay? But this is the Brobnar creatures. Oh, you know what? Uno momento. Let me tell you this. So as I went through this and my decision making, I'm going to tell you why everything became more challenging. So The 3 Equidon, there was one that I eliminated right off the top. I knew this was not an Equidon house that I wanted to have. So I was very easily able to just be like, no, and eliminate that one. The 2 Dinos, that was a little bit more tricky. This one that ended up in my deck, it just had the pieces I wanted a little bit more. It just had all the things that I thought, okay, this is going to make for a more consistent play. That's actually ended up being a big part of my decision-making process, was the consistency. And there was a lot of triples actually in people's decks. Like every deck had a lot of triples. And so what made me end up with this current iteration here that I went with, and I didn't change anything. It worked and I just kept going with it. So it had this, it had Brick Nasty and Endless Hordes. So this was basically what made this deck tick. Having a Brick Nasty and Endless Hordes with a warrior token was just phenomenal. Like it really created the situation in a fantastic way. Like I would actually just reap out with my board because I wanted to keep their board as full as possible, and then do it. And I rule a 6'd my warrior token a couple times. And then I got Fresh Marks here, which was fun. Bumpsy, which is great. Ragnarok Prep. Overrun. Ragnarok Prep. 2 Brick Nasties. And another Ragnarok Prep. So there's 3 Ragnarok Preps, 2 Brick Nasties, and then it had the Endless Hordes with the warrior token. Super good. So I'm gaining Ember, I'm destroying creatures. So I'm essentially wiping the board and a lot of time keeping a full board. And then at the end, if that was working, I could actually overrun to do even more. I think Ragnarok Prep went off every time because I had such a strong board advantage. And then we move into the Saurian house. This is the house that sometimes I would actually be leaning into dinos over my Brobnar house. And so I have Belastago, Tribune Pompatus. Huge. This card put in work. If people didn't have a board clear, I made a huge thing going on, and I just piled Ember on Faust so you couldn't kill Faust, and then everyone has Ember with Tribune. It's crazy. And I have Longest Lector creating my Brobnar tokens for me, plus having Ember getting bigger. That was in my final game. And then to cap it off, there was an Amphora Captura, and as you can see, there's damage pips on here. I've even didn't take Ember, and I would use that to capture to keep my opponent off a key because I hadn't even forged 1 key yet, and I was advancing. So I went for the strategy of my opponent has to wait a whole nother turn before they have the chance to forge a key, and I could draw into some of my Brobnar key control. And so I prioritize that phase. So if my opponent skips the key phase, then you can go to an advantage there of where they're not forging a key. They have to wait a whole nother turn, and I can respond before they can look to forge a key. And on top of that, we were under a time limit. And the last game I had, this was particularly important, stymieing my opponent's key forging, because it was grindy. We both were playing Dino Brobnar decks that had Brick Nasties, and they were fighting, and he had a great Mars situation. And I just built up this crazy Tribune Pompatus board. And so the ability to not let my opponent forge keys as we were getting closer to, like, as we had less time in the match, I knew could be an advantage. So I thought I prioritized stopping them forging keys rather than me necessarily gaining Ember because I already had the key advantage. So I just kept playing that out. And unfortunately for my opponent, he had a Kaboom, but it was literally the last card in his deck. And so until he cycled to the bottom, and then he had like 13 Ember as soon as he wiped my board. But I was already 2 keys up with Ember. So it was not great in the end for my opponent. And that's what made the difference. We did not have to use go to time rolls, just in case you were wondering. Phalanx Strike was huge here. I mean, getting to Exalt and then having Tribune so I could actually boost my creatures and then take out their board. So what I would do is as Tribune went out, I actually started prioritizing any creature that could take out Tribune. I would start prioritizing getting rid of that creature. So my opponent was always in a negative board state because I was building, I was creating bigger bodies, and then from there I would able to control their board just through fighting and reaping. for advantage all around. And then the Tricerian Legionnaire, make a token creature. This didn't last long for obvious reasons, but if I could keep that out on my Brobnar turn, it was not very great for my opponent. Then you got to recruit just for some extra stuff here. This card was really good. This was also a reason, I had two of them, Symposiums, was a reason why I actually wanted to put this in as well, because I could use my warrior tokens because I had a lot of token generation. I prioritized that in this deck due to the Brick Nasty situation, and use a token and then use another creature. And once I had Tribune Pompatus out, it basically made it so I'm just boosting my creatures up. So it was a very strong combo. Now let's go over to the Equidon house. Now the Equidon house was interesting because I had three. One I eliminated. This one, I'm going to be honest, there was one thing that really made me go, oh, you're choosing this one. And that was an Infomancer, a nice little anomaly. So that swayed me into this. Now, Stuart Uziani was great. Trade Secrets was really good, actually. This was huge. It had the damage pip as well, so Amphora Captura. The reason why this card was so helpful was because I had two mass buyouts in here, but as you can maybe tell, these were insurance policies or bursts. Like sometimes I'd use it on my Brobnar and just wipe the board, get a bunch of Ember because I knew my next play, it wouldn't matter, and it was to close out a game. But sometimes when I held these and I had my Dino board full of Ember from Tribune, these were dead cards for me. So having the Trade Secrets allowed me to have value for those cards beyond just, discarding them. And then of course this was all my support house here. So stealing a lot of Ember control, any problematic creatures couldn't get rid of. Excuse me. Corner the market just to stymie my opponent potentially for a third key, just giving that disruption and control. Artifact control, higher on, make a token creature. Yeah, just more token generation. Belligerent Guard, just a body that's big that can come out. This was great for a little bit more control of Reap, discard, get some stuff. Infomancer, of course. This was actually hard finding targets. It didn't prove to be that relevant, but it really drew me into this house. But the double mass buyout for the burst potential just to close out games and have a clear board was huge. And then, of course, closed door negotiations, which is fun to play with the Belligerent Guard. So you're giving your opponent like 2 cards. Yeah, I think I did that to open a game once, which was really fun. Yeah, because I went second, my opponent went first. They got an Ember. That was an interesting move, but it paid off. And yeah, this was it worked really well. Everything worked really well together. I went in Equidon the least. I would just suddenly go in there, steal some Ember, cycle some cards, but really it was in the end, it was the Brobnar and the Dinos that ruled the day, and pretty much it became GG once I got an Endless Hordes out. The burst was just too strong. The scaling Ember control I was very on top of. I only got Rant and Rived once when I had exactly 8 for my second key in my final game. In my second match, my opponent had 3 Martyrs. So the one that is a 4 power 1 armor creature from Sanctum that has the destroyed ability. If your opponent has 7 or more Ember, they lose all but 5. They had 3, so I had to be really conscious of controlling the board with that because I knew I would burst at some point. So yeah, it was a really fun tournament. This deck performed exceptionally well. 9 pods to look at and create a deck is quite daunting, and that was definitely some feedback for people. I found my note taking very helpful. I went through the process I showed on my previous video, and in the end, the Brobnar dominated, and I'm just absolutely loving Brobnar right now. The dinos were really cool as well. Like my dinos put in work, and I appreciated the heck out of them. So token choice is very cool. Someone actually opened a Prospector pod, but didn't play Equidon, just put the Prospector in so they could destroy it, and had lots of ways of doing that, which was really interesting. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, this was a fun tournament. People liked it, but you know what the a lot of people said is they enjoyed this, but they'd prefer just single deck sealed to play. That is really still the OG way, is what people like. So hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you some insight of building alliance deck, especially for sealed. Things to do is I just did my thing I saw in the last video. I wrote down stats that were important, circled the highest ones, then made decisions based on that, plus looking at things that I wanted to play. Just looking at it, that actually was a big part of my decision making. So hope you enjoyed this, and as always, please do like and subscribe, and if you're enjoying my content, don't be afraid to join my Patreon. I'm going to be adding some levels in, and anyone who is already in, when I go to add that, will get some benefits. So may your ember never be stolen and your keys forged promptly. Have a good one.